hello there. Happy New Year. Happy whatever 2025 will bring. I know it's not the first episode of the new year, but I just feel like saying that because we're recording this in January 2025. I am Kimberly Hayes de Muga.
And I'm Amanda Day.
And you're listening to Fundraising Heyday,
where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
And how all of us, and I mean all of us need to get together and do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy because, oh my God, we really could use it right now.
True story. And Patreon subscribers get these episodes early. So thanks so much for being a listener as always, or if you're new to the Fundraising Heyday podcast, if you can't get enough of the Heyday stuff, we encourage you to join our Patreon, which we mentioned just a second ago. We've got 4 tiers. They're all monthly subscriptions that range from $5 a month up to $30 a month. If you love what you're hearing, it's a great way to support the work that we're doing. Plus, you can get some fabulous bonus content, right? You get to hear episodes 48 hours earlier than the general public. So instead of Thursdays, your Tuesdays could be joined by Kimberly and I. You at different levels, you can check out our monthly book club. Here are monthly mistakes were made episodes and all kinds of other things. So mosey on over to the website, which is Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/fundraising heyday to check out the options. In fact, if you check out the FHD Friends and Such levels, you can do that for free for 7 days. So that may be a great way to see what you're missing out. And if you want to be a Patreon subscriber.
Come on over. So whatever tier you may choose that's a paying level subscription, you will get a monthly playlist curated by Amanda Day, GPC Esquire, 2024 GPA Distinguished Fellow, and all-around glittery snazzy dresser.
I feel like that's almost like 2 truths and a lie. Do you know which one of those things she said is a lie?
Yeah, she's not a lawyer, and it really bothers her when I say Esquire. But she's not a lawyer.
Funny, but when you say it for the world, I'm like, I'm not a lawyer.
Y'all, she's not a lawyer, and even though my bob is bobbing today, I'm not a senator's wife. So you know what? We're just here. We're just here trying to have a podcast. But seriously, feel free to pause us right now and go check out Patreon. We'll be here when you get back. It's all good. And when you come back, join us for what will be a rollicking, raucous, scintillating, titillating, and otherwise exciting episode on the latest updates to the Uniform Guidance, ACES. So listen, y'all, we are thrilled to have Kim Joyce and Associates returning as the season 8 sponsor for the first half of our season 8, which is crazy. CEO Kim Joyce and her team are celebrating 15 years of success with new service lines, all while expanding the depth and the breadth of their existing services. Kim is joining us to talk about trends in the field and more with a mini series that you'll hear at the beginning of each of the 12 episodes that Kim Joyce and Associates are sponsoring this season.
Kimberly and I often say that grant management is more complex than grant writing. Would you agree with that statement?
I would say they are both challenging in different ways.
Okay.
And you need different skill sets to do grant writing versus grants management. Grants management is a little more of the finance aspect and rules and regulations and, knowing about 2 CFR 200. So, and a lot of our clients that have received federal dollars need help with grants management. So different skill set, but we are expanding that service line. Also, we've been offering grants management services at Kim Joyce and Associates for several years now, but we are expanding that in 2025 to meet the needs of our clients.
Nice.
To find out more about Kim Joyce and Associates and their many incredible service lines, visit kimjoyceandassociates.com. They are a one-stop shop for all your grant-related needs. The Uniform Guidance. UG. 2 CFR Part 200. The Super Circular. the OMB circular. These are all nicknames for the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. That's the official name, right? But a lot of us will call it uniform guidance is what I tend to call it. This document sets forth the major rules and regulations for the federal government and every other agency eligible to receive federal funding. So if you are in charge of grant management or you play any role in ensuring that federal funding is accurately managed within your agency, or maybe you're a consultant who does this for a plethora of agencies, then this is the guidance for you.
It's true. And we're going to jump into it. And if you're watching us, I'm going to have my head down. I'm going to be reading stuff because there's a lot of detail. Mm-hmm. And if you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't manage the grants. What could this have to do with me? I have nothing to do with federal grant management. If you're writing federal or state grants, or perhaps state grants were passed through, federal funding, it will have an impact because, as we know, but I will say again, what you do in the writing and development of a grant and how the grant is going to be managed, y'all should already be dating. This should be a long-term established relationship so that your grant baby will be healthy and happy, and you'll be able to spend down that money and transform the community in the ways that it needs to be. So it really does all go together.
Yep.
So I'm going to be reading the fine print here, background, super exciting moment. Kind of like at the bottom of those pharmacy ads when they're like, side effects may include nausea, death, and other near-death experiences. Well, I'm going to be reading that part, only I'm not going to be reading it so fast. So here we are. Grab your beverage. Here we go. The last major update to the uniform guidance actually took place before this one, took place about 10 years ago, took place in December 2014. There have been some tweaks along the way since then, but nothing huge. So these revisions that we're going to go into today went into effect on all grants awarded October 1st, 2024 and later, right? But if you are working with a grant awarded before October 1st, 2024, and again, the grant awarded, and you'll know that award date because it'll be in your award letter, your grant agreement. Mm-hmm. Those grants awarded before October 1st, 2024 will be governed by the regulations at the time of the award because complexity. If an existing award received incremental or supplemental funding, and it sort of straddles those pre-October 1, post-October 1, 2024, you got to check with your funding agency because we're a lot of things, but we are not psychic mind readers and we cannot tell. Yeah. You're just going to have to ask, but just know that is something to ask about. And it also fits in with our always building relationships with your program officers and other funders, because that is a legit question to ask. So here we go.
Yep. And just one quick disclaimer before we start digging into the changes. This is just a quick overview. We could not cover every single change because the podcast we try to keep it between 30 and 45 minutes. We'll see what happens today. But we would be here forever, right? So we are highlighting some of the major changes and some, I'll tell you specifically, I was going through someone who has spent a big chunk of my career doing federal grant management. I was pulling the things that I thought, oh, this is what I would want to know if someone was telling me this. So what you really need to do is actually read the new guidance. It's a big document, that uniform guidance. It's boring, but you should read it. Take the time to do that. You can also check out funding updates put out by the different funding agencies. I used a few different ones to put this episode together, and I'm going to share those links in the show notes. So if you want to go directly, I think I've got a link from Housing and Urban Development. I believe there's one from EPA. I think DOJ. I think those are the three I was looking at. So I'll share those links. Your funder may have a similar either handout or PowerPoint presentation. So you could also check those as well. And of course, you can always talk to your funder. Like that's what they're there for. If you're like, hey, I understand there's some changes. Make sure I'm doing this right. Okay. So I'll provide all of those links in the show notes.
Quick and shameless plug, we are actually also going to be covering this with the year-long grant management training we're doing with the Grant Professionals Association.
Yep.
Next level university stuff. So
that in the show notes.
Yep, we'll link to that. Also, if you want us to softly read the entire OMB as some sort of ASMR kind of experience, we're down with that. We'll be like, non-federal entity, cost sharing match, and maybe it'll help you go to sleep. But that may be paid content, because I feel like that's going to be a fire way to break through bad sleeping habits.
You'd think by now I learned not to drink while Kimberly's talking because I almost spewed my tea. I'm like, that's paid content.
No? Okay. No. Okay. That's good. Because that hurts. That hurts. So listen, y'all, we're going to start off with some just sort of terminology, some updates and definitions. And this will be me reading it because, yeah, I do like to joke around, but we got to get this business tight and delivered because accuracy is important in federal grant management. So here we'll start off with the first one. A non-federal entity is now a recipient or a subrecipient. And we all know those definitions are super crystal clear. Don't shoot the messenger. I am just here delivering the definition and name change. Cost sharing or matching, our friends from yore talking about what kind of skin of applicant would need to put in the game in terms of cash, volunteer, employee share, all those other kinds of things. No more matchy. It's only cost sharing now. So cost sharing is cost sharing. Matching is being stored in an undisclosed location, and we can't tell you more. A federal awarding agency is now just known as a federal agency. And you know what? I don't even have a joke. That makes sense. Good for them. Let's cut out a word. Federal agency. A for-profit organization is no longer included within private entity. And I know that sounds a little sci-fi, but go with me on this. When you look at the sort of that laundry list of eligibility, that's usually within the first couple of pages of a grant announcement. For-profit is going to have its own little area. So if you are working for a for-profit institution that gets government funding for tech development, clinical trials, whatever it may be, when you're looking at these announcements, really double check that eligibility section. And overall, the updates promise that they've removed outdated or infrequently used acronyms. And I was so excited to see that because I'm acronym challenged. But then I read the last half of the sentence and it said they've added some new ones. And I'm like, y'all, for real? Really? More acronyms. So perhaps removing acronyms that were not so popular and replacing them with other acronyms that we will, or at least I will struggle to learn and remember. So thanks for that. Over to you, Amanda.
Woohoo. One of the sections they updated was the whistleblower section, which I can appreciate.
Can I make a whistleblower noise?
Go for it. And when possible, I'm including the actual section and uniform guidance. So if you wanted to mosey on over there yourself, I'm sure you've got your copy right in front of you as you're listening, so you can take furious notes, right? And highlight sections. So, but in section 200.217 is the whistleblower protection. They require an employee of a recipient or subrecipient to inform their employees in writing of employee whistleblower protections, which is nice because it's always been, if you receive federal funds, you had to have whistleblower protection, but you didn't necessarily have to tell your employees that you had it. And so, I mean, for the longest time, I didn't even know that was a thing, right? Because how would I know? So now it's a requirement that you've got to tell your employees, like, hey, there is whistleblower protection, especially for those of you that are managing these federal grants. In section 200.430, it talks about termination. If an award no longer meets the program goals or if agency priorities, the termination of the award is no longer mandatory, but it's discretionary. So that's nice, right? So if, some things have changed and you reach out to your funder going, hey, I know this was the original purpose, this XYZ has changed, you could actually have a discussion with your funder and they may say, you know what, that still fits within guidelines or this makes sense. And they don't have to automatically just say it's done. So that's a nice thing. The federal agency or pass-through entity must clearly and unambiguously specify all termination provisions in the terms and conditions of the federal awards. Just more clear guidance is what that is. And when the federal agency terminates the federal award prior to the end of performance, they must report the termination in SAM.gov or the Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System, CPARS.
It's an acronym.
Woo! Yeah. So in other words, if your grant does get terminated associated with whistleblower, nothing can be swept under the rug. It's going to be, put in lots of places for people to find it. So it's just another
Should
reminder of
be.
why you need to do the right thing. And also a good reminder why if you work at an agency that is doing a very bad thing, they probably shouldn't be getting other federal funds, right? And so this way, if you do become a whistleblower, it's not going to be swept under the rug, which is a nice thing, I think.
Concur. And thanks for another acronym that's floating around in the alphabet soup of my brain. So I want to take y'all on over to something that I'm actually in favor of. So you know what? When funding entities do things that I like, I want to say praise to you. So my
Absolutely.
praise is around the updates to how notices of funding opportunities, which is the NOFO, if you're keeping track of your acronyms. We should probably do a drinking game about acronyms, only we'd be so drunk.
Yes, we would.
We'd be hospitalized before we got to the end of this episode. But NOFOs, according to these new updates to the OMB, must be simplified and arranged in a specific format. And you can find that format in Appendix 1 of Uniform Guidance, but I'm going to just hit the highlights for you here. And I'm in favor of that. Let's systematize as much as possible. It's going to make it so much easier for organizations seeking funding to, you're looking for the information all in the same place. So go ahead.
Well, let me say too, like right now, I work part-time for board grants as a research specialist. And one of the things I do is I will read the big, long, complicated NOFOs, and I'll do grant assessments. Basically, I'm turning it kind of into a 4 to 5 page rundown of what a client needs to know, like, is this a right fit or not? And then I also take the NOFO and create lists of like, okay, what are all the attachments we need? Here's the draft of what the narrative needs, not the draft, but the outline of what the narrative needs to include. And here's different things like that. So I have been reading, I've always read NOFOs, but when I worked in local government, I did a lot of DOT, a lot of DOJ. But now because we have so many different clients, I'm reading so many different NOFOs. And oh my gosh, it made me realize like Department of Justice, I love theirs because they usually keep them to about 45 pages. So they're not 100 plus pages long. And they're always in the same order. And it's so easy to find everything. And so the fact that they are streamlining this was the thing that made me most excited out of everything else that's in these updates. So I'm with you on the excitement.
We're excited, thrilled, and pleased. So let me break it down for you. So allegedly, the new uniform format is going to be basic information, eligibility, program description, application, content and format, submission requirements and deadlines. Your girl's going to be going to that section first because time. Application review information, award notices, post-award requirements and administration, and then sort of other items. I would also caution you, as Amanda has said before, whether you're doing some sort of prospect research project or it's just your job, or someone has handed you this thing and said, hey, we're going to write this grant, read that NOFO all the way through at least twice, take notes, do what you got to do. Sometimes I do it on screen. Most times I read it on screen, then I print it out and highlight, because you don't want to get all the way, you don't want to sort of stop and then realize that the post-award requirements are something your agency cannot fulfill for whatever reason. Like maybe it's a data that you cannot collect or something. So don't sleep on any of these sections is what I'm saying.
Absolutely right. So now let's change gears and let's talk about procurement, because money and how you spend it and who you spend it on can really get you in trouble. So one of the things, and I love this, they removed the prohibition on geographic preferences. And if you're like, what the heck are you talking about? Used to, you could not say local vendor preferred. Like if you were in Georgia and a vendor from California met the requirements and was the lowest bidder, you had to take them, even if there was business within your own community that provided those same services. You were not allowed to give them like extra points because they were local. But now you can do some geographic preferences, which honestly I think it's right, especially if you're a small town and you wanting to support your own local economy. I think that's a lovely thing. So
And the lowest bid is not always the best bid if depending on how you build your criteria
exactly.
into your RFPs. Just we all know that. Like I don't necessarily want the lowest airfare if it's on some crazy airline where people are fighting in the streets and fighting in the aisles. I'm just not naming names, just giving
Just
examples
giving
here.
examples. Yep. It also says that recipients or subrecipients should prioritize products and services that can be reused, refurbished, or recycled. Maybe they contain recycled content, are bio-based, or are energy and water efficient and are sustainable. So no matter what it is you're buying, if there's a way to make some priority or you're looking for things, just think, just trying to be more environmentally friendly, which is never a bad thing. Um, and then the types of procurement, there used to be 5 different types. Now there's 3, and this is detailed in section 200.320. Okay, so your first type is informal. Okay, and within informal, it includes a couple of things. So even though it's only 3 types, it's still, things are bundled. But under informal, you can do it used to be small purchases. They've changed that wording to simplified acquisitions. Okay, I'm going to read this because I'll make sure I get it right. The aggregate dollar amount of the procurement transaction is higher than the micro purchase threshold, but does not exceed the simplified acquisition threshold. If simplified acquisition procedures are used, price or rate quotations must be obtained from an adequate number of qualified sources. Unless specified by the federal agency, the recipient or subrecipient may exercise judgment in determining what number is adequate. So in other words, and we're going to get to it in a minute, the micro purchase is at $10,000. Okay, so basically, if it's over that, they're just saying you have to create some sort of simplified acquisition. And they're just saying if it's more than $10,000, your agency can determine what the process is. So used to, they would say you had to get more than one quote. So that could still be the thing, right? You have to get more than one quote. Or maybe you say you have to get 3 quotes. Or maybe you say it has to be 3 quotes and approved by a supervisor or whatever it is, right? So they're basically saying you could put some processes in place. So there needs to be some sort of process, but you decide what it is. So that was the simplified acquisition. Number 2, micro purchase. The threshold was $5,000. Now it's $10,000. So that means you can, if it's cost $10,000 or less for whatever it is you're buying, you can just buy it. You don't have to get quotes. You don't have to, again, these are the federal levels. Your own organization's purchasing policy has to be equal or more stringent. So your agency, it could still be $1,000 where you work.
Yep.
Now, could you go to your boss and say, hey, did you know the federal government raised it from 5 to 10? Maybe we should consider raising it from 1 to 3. Certainly you could do that.
Baby steps, baby steps.
Now, there also is a process. Say you're some large agency. Like I can imagine New York City government. Like I can imagine their budget is probably big, and $10,000 may be a drop in the bucket to them, right? Or a state agency.
I think you're right, Amanda. I think you're right.
I think so. You're able to do a self-certification process and raise your micro purchase level to $50,000. So that's certainly an option. But again, if you're a small town and your entire budget is $3 million, I doubt that's going to be approved. But this is more for like agencies who are used to spending.
Maybe hospitals,
Yes.
large universities where, it's just
Absolutely.
the budget's huge. You're buying all sorts of equipment and all sorts of super expensive things.
Perfect. So, if you are, and then after that, if you want to go the micro purchase route for something that's above $50,000, it can happen, but it has to be approved by your cognizant agency. And your cognizant agency, that is it's not necessarily the funder who gave you that grant. It is the agency where you get the majority of your federal funding from. So you could have a grant from Department of Justice, but if most of your money comes from Health and Human Services, they'd have to approve that you would be able to do that. So those are the 3 things. You can have some sort of process. It can be a micro purchase, which is $10,000 or $50,000 level if you get that certification. Or if you want it to be above 50,000, you've got to get some approval ahead of time, right? With your cognizant agency. Okay, so all of that is under the informal process of purchasing things. Okay, so section 2 is the formal procurement process. These are known as sealed bids or proposals. Okay, these are bids that are publicly solicited through an invitation in a firm fixed price contract. It can be lump sum or unit price, and it's awarded to the responsible bidder whose bid conforms with all the material items and conditions of the invitation and is the lowest in price. Sealed bids are the preferred method for construction services. So again, low bidder, but they still have to meet all of the requirements. Like if one of your requirement is you have to have worked on another federal project before and they never have, even if they're the lowest bidder, you could throw them out. So it is, money does matter, but they still have to meet those requirements.
It's like my airfare analogy. Like if they're the lowest bidder, but you have to pay for a seat that works, or carry on and bags, or bathroom access, I don't know, or a fight-free zone, then, they're not really the lowest bidder.
Yep. So, like I said, formal, it has this really, I should have said at the beginning, it's two-parter. So formal includes sealed bids, which we just talked about, and it also includes proposals. So this is used when conditions are not appropriate for using sealed bids, and it may result in a fixed price or cost reimbursement contract. So these are things like, it's not an app, like construction is pretty apples to apples, right? Like we want you to build this road. It's going to be 4 lanes wide. Each lane is this wide. It's going to go from point A to point B. You have to use this type of material, blah, 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 right? So where everybody's building the exact same thing, no matter who's going to build it, right? But there can be things where the materials involved aren't necessarily what you're paying for. You're probably paying for experience. Like if you're a school system and you're buying new curriculum, are you really going for the lowest bid? Or are you going for the agency that has what is well known and having accurate materials and engaging curriculum for students and things like that? Or if you are designing a building, are you really going with a low bidder? Or are you going with someone that actually knows how to design a building that is going to meet the needs of your organization? So these are the kinds of things you would probably lean towards when it comes to a proposal, where price does matter, but it's not the driving force. I've been on review committees that have worked with proposals before. And a lot of times the score sheet, it'll be like 20% of the score, which you can range from 1 to 20, is their experience. And so you're looking at what other types of projects have they done, how long have they been around, things like that. 20% of it may be their price. And so you still can look at the price and go, hey, they're really good at what they do, but they're charging an arm and a leg. So yeah, I'm going to rate that lower. So there's a lot of factors involved outside of just the price, right?
That's fair.
And then the last one is non-competitive procurements. Formerly, we used to call these sole source.
Yep.
The non-competitive procurement method may only be used if one of the following circumstances apply. So there's 5 reasons you can do this non-competitive. That means you're not bidding it out. You're not doing a formal bid process. You're just selecting someone. And again, this is going to be for prices typically over that micro purchase threshold, because you can do it there anyway. But it's if the aggregate amount of the procurement transaction does not exceed the micro purchase threshold. So what I just said, like if it meets micro threshold, then yeah, you're not getting any other bids. Number 2, the procurement transaction can only be fulfilled by a single source, meaning there is only one person, one company, one whatever on the face of the planet that can do this job. Number 3, the public exit. I always cannot say this word. Exigency or emergency for the requirement will not permit a delay resulting from providing public notice of a competitive solicitation. If a hurricane comes through and wipes out a bridge that is a huge connector in a community, you're probably not going to have to go through a formal bid process to find somebody to rebuild that bridge and build it quickly, right? That's an example. Fair. The recipient or subrecipient requests in writing to use a non-competitive procurement method in the federal agency or pass-through provides a written approval. So you could write up like, this is why we want to do this, and they can either approve or deny. And then the last one is after soliciting several sources, competition is determined inadequate. And I've seen this before where it is a project that a lot of people could do, but maybe it's a really, really busy time of the year, or maybe it's a smaller project that most of the bigger agencies are like, we don't want to fool with that. And you only get a bid, even though there's probably 30,000 other agencies that can do it. And so when I've used that before, what we had to do is we advertised it publicly, and usually we would list, here's all the agencies we reached out to, and here's all their reasons why they said they weren't bidding on it. Because, we would always want to try and get at least 3
Yeah.
bids, is the minimum we would always hope for when I worked in local government. So those are the 5 reasons why you could do the non-competitive procurement. It didn't really change much from sole source, but they're just changing the lingo because I don't know. Why not? Let's all make us learn some new language.
Yeah, sure. So I'm here to shift a little bit again and talk about other funding thresholds that have changed. So again, going to be super clear that I'm getting all my terminology absolutely correct, and I'm going to try not to joke around. But I might or I might not. So first of all, equipment, right? And that you're going to find that in the OMB in 200.313E as an Echo 1. That used to be $5,000 and now it's $10,000 per item. And they'll also break out exactly how to define equipment, and because those definitions have changed over time, right? Like 10 or 15 years ago, computers were considered equipment. It might have been even a little bit longer than that because they were so expensive, and technologies change and times change. So it just, now they're considered a supply, right? And supplies, and you're going to find information about that in 200.314, also used to be $5,000 threshold or less, right? And now it's $10,000 or less, which kind of makes a lot of sense when you see how much prices have risen in certain sectors for many different things.
Yep.
Everyone's favorite, the single audit threshold, 200.501A, like Apple, was $750,000 in federal funding spent in a single fiscal year, not awarded, spent. So it was actually kind of easy if you were a local government that had several federal grants running. That was might have been a pretty easy threshold to reach. Well, that's grown from $750,000 to a flat $1 million. Nice. Good to know, could be helpful. Something that's come up a lot, certainly with my clients, has been the change of the de minimis rate for indirect costs. Again, those are operational costs that you could add into your grant that are not directly related to the program, project, or thing for which you're seeking funding. You can find more information about that in 200.414F, as in Frank. It was 10% and now it's 15%. Now, I don't want to get all into should you use this or not. I just want to let you know that it has been raised. Now, if your agency already has or is in the process of negotiating a perhaps more realistic de minimis indirect cost rate with a federal entity that gives you the most of your federal funding, then this won't apply to you. But I just want to let most folks know that this could be an option. So it's 10%. I'm going from 10% to 15%. And remember, if there's a grant ceiling of $1 million, you don't get to apply for $1 million and $1,150,000, because that's 15% of $1 million. It has to be included in that grant ceiling. Mm-hmm. And coming up on the very last one, and sort of different pieces and parts of where thresholds have changed. Fair market value disposition, 200.313E as in Echo 2. That's where you're going to find in your OMB. When you're ready to sell equipment that still has a value of $10,000 per item, I'm thinking like transport vehicles or research instrumentation, like big ticket items. So if it still has a value of $10,000 per item, you can retain $1,000 of value received through disposition. So that's doubled, because it used to be a $500 of the value, or 10% of the proceeds. So able to keep a little bit more of the money if you are disposing of that now no longer needed big ticket item. Again, it really depends agency to agency and even grant by grant. So make sure you are following your grant agreement to the T when it comes to disposition of this kind of equipment.
Yep, true story. Another change is in the entertainment and prizes section. This is section 200.438. I pulled this out. I don't think I ever tried to get money under this, but again, working in local government, we weren't doing a lot of entertainment, but I know a lot of nonprofits would ask about this. Not that they were
Yep.
wanting to like hire, somebody to come in and perform, but it was more like, hey, we want kids to participate in after school reading and spelling because it's going to
You
make
get
them
the
do better.
prize.
And we need a reason to get them here. So a prize will do the trick. Can I do it? So generally it's considered unallowable, but unless there is a specific programmatic purpose and it's included in the federal award. And they give some further info. Prizes or challenges are now an allowable cost so long as they have a specific and direct programmatic purpose and are included within the federal award. So when this goes back to what Kimberly says is, I only write grants, I don't manage them. You need to know this. So if you do have that after school program and you want to do prizes to encourage kids to participate in things, you're allowed to do that, but you've got to write it into the grant to begin with. You can't come, you could come back later and try and ask, but that's going to be harder. So you want to know that.
I wouldn't even waste my time asking after the fact.
Um, there is an OMB memorandum. It's M-10-11, which it's called the Guidance on the Use of Challenges and Prizes to Promote Open Government, that was issued way back in March of 2010. I'll put the link of that in the show notes, but that gives more details because this is something that has been allowed, but it's just been, they haven't been very clear about it. And so this memo does actually help spell that out. So I'll provide that link in the show notes.
I think prizes and challenges, adding that back or even allowing it for the first time is a wonderful thing because again, if you're looking at workforce development, could it be a prize, could be a gift card so that you could go get clothes that are appropriate for interviews. It could be a gas card. If you live in Atlanta, public transportation will probably not get you where you need to be for certain jobs in certain parts of town because Atlanta. But then if you were having access to gas cards or even Uber or Lyft, can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? That could be a game changer. So yay for that. I'm going to move on to the exciting world of cost sharing, the artist formerly known as cost sharing and matching. And you'll find details about this in the OMB section 200.306. We got to keep it moving. Because of people folding laundry and walking their dogs listening to us, Amanda, we got to keep it cheerful. I just feel the need.
It's
Also,
OMB.
The show notes are going to be your saving grace. We're going over these things with the hope that you go like, oh yeah, prizes and challenges. Let me read more about this when I get back into the office or whatever.
Absolutely.
So cost sharing, it's an important category, often misunderstood, often underestimated, and often problematic. But again, it's 200.306. We're saying cost sharing. We're not saying matching anymore, which actually I'm in favor of because let's just call it what it is. Let's just call it what it is. So Amanda actually found something that I really want to ask you about. I want to just read it out and then I want you to elaborate because I want to make sure that we get this absolutely right. Voluntary committed cost sharing may not be used as a factor during merit review for federal research grants. And I had thoughts and feelings about this, but go on.
Yeah. I just saw this in a National Science Foundation grant I was reviewing recently. I forget which one. I looked at several, but that was one of the things. And it shook me because I don't do a lot of NSF grants, but I have seen in the past grants where there was no match requirement, cost sharing requirement, but if you were willing to put some in, you would get extra points on your application. Now, if you're a wealthy organization that can afford that, then great. But if you're not, and you're looking to this grant, it can be a detriment. So I'm thinking this can really help agencies that have a great need, have a great program, have a great application, but they don't have match, or they just have enough match to make their requirements. And so they're not being penalized for not having extra money in the bank. So for that reason, I like it. I think I think it's kind of evening the playing field for who maybe can get access to grant funds. So it's
You
right
know
now,
what?
it's just for federal research grants, but I wouldn't be surprised if the next round they end up making it a
Doing
rule.
that.
I'm my crystal ball, she's not always accurate. So, but I hope it goes that way, honestly.
I hope it does too. And thanks for breaking that down. Because first I'm like, oh, come on. And no, you're right. You're right. It could inadvertently penalize agencies that don't have the resources to do
Yeah.
some splashy cost sharing and add that persuasive language. So okay, I'm back. I'm back now. Um, Federal agencies, and another update around cost sharing, federal agencies are also discouraged from using voluntary committed cost sharing as a factor during the merit review of applications for other federal financial assistance programs. So they're trying to just spread this out, this idea. I mean, it is great to show, oh, look at us, look how we're collaborating, look how we're doing this. But for folks who really need the money, they probably really need the money because there's not enough resources around to do that. I
Yep.
realize there are exceptions. I realize that you may have thoughts and feelings about this, but there you are, an update on cost sharing changes to the newly revised OMB.
There you go. Now I'm going to move on to program income, which is section 200.307. So this is basically when you're doing a program and it's grant funded, but it earns income, which could be through a variety of things, right? So recipients and subrecipients, we are now encouraged to earn income to defray program costs where appropriate and must be used for original purpose of the federal award. So let's just say you are doing a could be an example. You are doing an after you're a police athletic league and you're doing a summer camp for kids and you've got a sliding fee scale for participants could be an example. So for it may be absolutely free for those who live within a certain mean, but then others who have the means to help pay for their kid to go to summer camp, they're going to pay. And all they're asking is then you just put that money back. We're going to get into some more specifics, but basically, you don't get to take that money and then go give the police chief a raise through that's not how that works. But you can put it back into the program, right? So they're encouraging it. Now, please be also mindful, there are some federal programs that specifically do not allow you to charge participants if you're getting federal money. So you got to read all the fine print.
That's true.
Program income that's earned during the period of performance may only be used for cost incurred during the period of performance or allowable closeout costs. So you don't get to save it for next year. You would, I mean, if it's a 1-year grant, you'd have to put it right back into the program. Program income must be expended prior to requesting additional federal funds. Okay. And then there's 3 ways funders may ask you to deal with the income, which this has been the same when the last update, this was included as well, but just thought I'd point it out. One is called deduction. This is if you earn program income, it's deducted from the total allowable costs, reducing the overall total amount of the federal award. So let's just say you get $100,000 to run a program, you make $10,000 in federal income. The federal government's going to say, great, now we're only give you $90,000 because you only need $100,000 to run it. So that just puts money back into that program for them to help with other people who need it. Another way they may do it is the addition program. Program income is added to the total allowable costs, increasing the overall total amount of the federal award. So this means, again, those same numbers, you now have $110,000 and you're like, but wait, my budget's only $100,000. Well, let's just say you were like, oh, when we went to the park, we lost a lot of baseballs so we need to buy some more of those. And we realized, we thought we were going to be outside, but it's been so hot this summer that we need more things to do inside. So we want to buy a ping pong table and maybe some video games and maybe some board games, things like that. Again, you probably would want to go through your funder to make sure everything's legit, but you just have more money to spend. The other one is cost sharing. This is when program income is used to meet the cost sharing requirement. So if there was a 10% match, whereas before you were having to pull that from maybe your general operating or somewhere else, now the income counts for that. So you could use your match maybe for a match for another grant, right? So that's a nice thing. Your federal agency should specify what program income method that they're going to use. It should be listed in the terms and condition of your federal grant award.
Mm-hmm.
The deduction method will be used if the federal agency does not specify a method. So if they don't tell you anything, it's going to be deduction. When no program income method is specified in the federal award, prior approval is required to use the addition or cost sharing methods. However, the addition method will be used when no method is specified for awards made to institutions of higher education and nonprofit research institutions. So, there's different rules for different types of agencies. So it's just one of those things. You want to read all the fine print. Here are a couple of things that are not considered program income unless specified in the federal statutes, regulations, or the terms and conditions. Government revenues, so taxes, special assessments, levies, fines, and similar revenues. That's not program income. That's your normal income you're getting. Property, proceeds from the sale of a real property, equipment, or supplies. That's not program income. And license fees and royalties. These are things for like royalties for copyright material, patent applications, trademark, and inventions. And I think property and licenses and fees used to be considered program income, and they're not now. So I believe that's a change, if my memory. So there you go, program income.
I just wanted to wrap up sort of our laundry list of all these changes with some not necessarily related ones. We'll just consider this the miscellaneous section of some changes coming up. That's right. So cybersecurity internal controls. It's the OMB changes are they're wanting to emphasize that more, and they're added requirements, but there's not a lot of specificity, shocking, about those kinds of changes. But just know that that is in there, and if that is a concern for you, again, if you're a grant writer but not a grant manager, this would you need to make sure that you're all set for that before you spend 100 hours on a grant and then you're like knocked out on a technicality such as lack of cybersecurity internal controls. Also, if you're working with or employed by or partnering with veteran-owned businesses, just know that they have been added to the list of encouraged businesses for procurement contracts. Like it's like minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses are included, and you know what, rightfully so. There also have been some clarifying administrative actions and factors all around our friend's suspension and debarment. Subject of many a podcast episode where we marvel on people's sort of their ingenious actions and also their stupidity when it comes to fraud and other criminal acts committed using federal funds. But just know that there are some other kinds of administrative actions and factors, including business license status and other things that are coming up with that.
There you go. So I know that was a whirlwind of stuff we dumped on you. Again, we just want you to be aware. And our final takeaways for all of this is that generally revisions are relaxing rather than imposing restrictions on applicants and recipients and subrecipients. So this is a good thing. I find these changes to, for the most part, be in our favor.
Mostly.
Guidance is supposed to be written more in plain language to clarify concepts and terms that have been subject to multiple interpretations. The last round of the guidance, I felt like a team of lawyers wrote them. And I remember we used to do in grant management workshops, we'd do like, hey, read this section and what do you think's allowable and what's not allowable? And sometimes it was easy, right? Like under alcohol, you cannot spend federal money on alcohol. That was pretty clear. But then some of the sections, it was like, I read 3 pages and I don't know what it says. So they're trying to clean up that language and make it a little more common so everybody gets it. Again, they've streamlined how all the NOFOs are supposed to work. If that happens, I'm going to be the happiest girl. Of course, I'm sure it's going to take some time and we'll see. But I'm hopeful. And then they also reduce some administrative burdens on applicants and recipients. And so that's a good thing. All in all, I'd say some beneficial changes to us grant managers. I'll take it.
And also important things for grant writers. If you're not managing and you're writing, important ways to build those bridges to better communication for everybody when it comes to federal grant management.
Absolutely. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Kim Joyce and Associates. If you want to learn more about their many service offerings, visit kimjoyceandassociates.com. That's KIMJOYCE and associates.com.
So I'm not going to lie. Today was a lot to take in. But we will also, not only was it a lot, we want to remind you that in no way, shape, or form are we saying we covered all of the OMB changes. Amanda was responsible for developing the content for today's episode, and she went in and handpicked the areas and the changes that she thought would be of most interest to most of our listeners. Again, if grant management is somewhere in your other duties as assigned, perhaps in your job description, you owe it to yourself. If you don't work directly with your finance department, you owe it to each other to go through these changes together, because there could be some important implications in the way that you are creating grants. And check out our show notes. We are going to we have listed out all of our resources there to let you know, clicking on the links, checking things out, because knowledge, my friends, is power.
It is. We're so honored you chose to stick around for this episode today. Join us again in 2 weeks, where we are sharing another interview from the 2024 Grant Summit hosted by the Grant Professionals Association. This time, we're talking about the effects of ageism in our...
Oh, but the title of that was far more impolite. And so I'm excited because it involves cussing. See ya.
See you then, guys.